A Chicago activist testifies to the U.S. Senate. Former Illinois Governor Pat Quinn pushing for a millionaire surcharge to address the state's highest-in-the-nation property taxes. And the state's high SNAP error rate taking focus. It is Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop, editor of Illinois at the Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and sign up for the newsletter. It's real simple. All you got to do is go to the website, and at the top right corner, you'll see newsletter. You click through, you sign up, and you will get headlines in your inbox each and every weekday morning. Actually, every morning. But go to the Illinois page to get the latest there, but you can also go to the main page to see some of the latest national headlines, including President Donald Trump signing that bill to release the Epstein files. That's clearly going to have a lot of headlines associated with it when those files ultimately get released. So stay with the Center Square for updates there. But here with Illinois in Focus Daily, each and every weekday morning, we break down things that you need to know about as a taxpayer in the state of Illinois, and a lot to handle here. So we got 3 segments coming up, but I did want to start just briefly here about the price of the holiday meal, right? The traditional Thanksgiving holiday feast. It's actually less than it was last year. So Farm Bureau putting out this, that a classic holiday feast for 10 in Illinois cost $55.18, or about $5.52 per person. That's a 5% decrease from 2024, according to the Farm Bureau. They say that the centerpiece of the most Thanksgiving tables, the turkey, dramatically decreased in price, which helped bring down the overall cost of dinner. The average price for a 16-pound frozen turkey in Illinois is $18.03. So you could see some sweet potatoes. You got 3 pounds of that for $3.39. You've got 14 ounces of cubed stuffing mix, $3.45, and some cranberries. And don't forget about that pumpkin pie and the whipped cream as well, for a total of $49.20 for a family of 10 to eat Thanksgiving meal. So interesting to see that yesterday as well. And I know President Donald Trump's talked about other numbers that have been put out by like Walmart. I think he's talked about in the past week of how the price of food is down for Thanksgiving this year compared to previous years. So clearly you've got some interesting things on the economic front when it comes to national news. And again, I want to make sure that you subscribe here to YouTube for Everyday Economics, where our team really delves into how the economy is impacting you, including the most recent blip in the stock market with tech stocks. So be sure to catch those episodes of Everyday Economics here on YouTube with the Center Square. Another reason why you should subscribe here. But you wake up with us each and every weekday morning for Illinois in Focus Daily. Greatly appreciate you guys being here. And if you are on, you can join the live chat. Pretty lively bunch. Regular crew in there also sounding off on these issues and more. But if you can't join the live show, you can watch the show, and it's rebroadcast. Once we're done, it just continues, and you can watch it anytime you want. You can watch individual segments of the show, or you can listen to the podcast. So go find the podcast, Illinois in Focus, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts served up. All right, it is Illinois in Focus. We'll talk about Chicago flips red, testifying to the U.S. Senate yesterday about immigration enforcement. It's right here with Illinois in Focus Daily.
Tries to stop this, but the judges, the Illinois Attorney General, the Chicago Teachers Union, certain clergy members, the mayor, and the governor block them every step of the way. This is not compassion. This is failure.
It's Danielle Carter Walters, the Chicago Flips Red activist who testified in front of the U.S. Senate yesterday, and we'll hear some more of what she had to say for a U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee hearing focused on immigration enforcement. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with you each and every weekday morning. If you get to the website, thecentersquare.com, you'll see the headline Jim Talamonte put together. Watch Democrats leave hearing before minorities testimony on Biden's border policies. So here we go. Let's get into it. A member of a minority grassroots Chicago organization testified before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee on the Judiciary Wednesday that violent gang members in the U.S. illegally are hurting minority communities, but committee members from the Democratic Party left before she spoke. So Wednesday's hearing in Washington with the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee titled ICE Under Fire, the Radical Left's Crusade Against Immigration Enforcement. U.S. Senator John Cornyn from Texas, he had some opening things to say about what exactly is going on with immigration enforcement in some of these Democrat-run states and cities.
Sadly, many of these communities have suffered for decades under the weight of failed policing mandates. The influx of millions of illegal aliens exacerbated the failure of these policies, resulting in skyrocketing crime.
And you see that in Chicago, you see it in Broadview, where the attacks against immigration and customs enforcement officers, according to DHS, has increased 1,000%. A lot of video evidence of that, but also video evidence of, tear gas being deployed and some various law enforcement tactics being deployed to arrest protesters, and also video of alleged non-citizens being tackled and thrown into vans and such. So that's why Democrats, at least Senator from California, essentially protested and boycotted the hearing and got up and left, followed by other Democrats in the Senate Judiciary Committee.
So let me once again say that violence against law enforcement is never okay. But I refuse to sit back as this committee attempts to use or condone the use of law enforcement as a shield for abuses of power by this administration. If today's hearing was indeed a serious effort to protect our law enforcement, we would have government witnesses testifying before us today and fielding our questions as a committee. But that's not the case. If today's hearing was a serious effort, those government witnesses would be providing facts and data behind the numbers that our Department of Homeland Security so often cites to claim an increase in assaults on its officers and agents. But even after repeated requests, months and months of requests from my office and from others to the Department of Homeland Security to back up their claims of is it 500%? Is it 1,000%? Now we're even hearing claims of up to 8,000% increase in assaults or death threats. They've refused to provide them. Mr. Chairman, you're very well aware of this. You and I discussed this last week. And as far as I can tell, they've even refused your requests for data and statistics. Why am I insisting on this? Why am I making this point? Because that data is critical. Not only would it allow us to actually verify their claims, but that data would be critical to informing our policy response. So no, today's hearing is not a serious attempt to protect law enforcement. It's designed to fuel the propaganda machine and encourage even more brutal immigration enforcement operations. It's designed to cover up for the fact that after President Trump pledged to go after the worst of the worst, this we do know from DHS statistics. Over 70% of those currently detained in ICE custody have no criminal record. If they were simply focused on those truly dangerous, violent criminals, there would be no objection, there would be no debate, there would be no discussion. But the reality is far from their claims. At the same time, what we are seeing every day is new acts of brutality and misuse of force in communities across the country.
So you've got the senator from California making those statements and then ultimately getting up and leaving. Illinois U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, who's the minority spokesperson on the Senate's Judiciary Committee, not saying anything during the hearing. Now, to Chicago Flip's Red Vice President, Danielle Carter Walters, she testified about some troubling instances of alleged migrant crime and how the media isn't really telling the real story on the ground. And you've got Democrat politicians that are shielding these with sanctuary policies, shielding this from really being truly understood by people on the ground.
The place that happened where the ICE raid happened on 75th and South Shore Drive, Trendiagua had taken over that building, and the fake news failed to mention that prior to that, a couple of months earlier, that one of those Trendiagua gang members had executed another illegal alien, shot him in the head, and buried his body in concrete.
Again, she went on to discuss how this really is not being assisted in public safety with Democrat policies that are shielding non-citizens in the state and the city of Chicago.
ICE tries to stop this, but the judges, the Illinois Attorney General, the Chicago Teachers Union, certain clergy members, the mayor, and the governor blocked them every step of the way. This is not compassion. This is failure.
You have Republican senators making their points heard as well. Florida Senator Ashley Moody talking about how the Biden administration's open border policies led to some states essentially looking the other way.
Let me tell you another thing that I had to file suit on to get information when we found out. Historically, when we picked up people internationally that were trafficking drugs, killing Americans, when they were brought to our country to be prosecuted and put in prison for that, as soon as they served that sentence, they were deported because they were picked up in international places, because they were drug traffickers. Who would have ever released them into our country when their only skill is drug trafficking in the middle of a drug crisis? Oh no, the Biden administration did. They started taking federal prisoners in federal prisons for drug trafficking here illegally, and instead of deporting them when their sentences were over, they released them back into your communities in America. And their only skill was pushing drugs into your communities. That's their skill.
So where are we going to go from here with the U.S. Senate having these hearings? It's a good question, one that we will obviously with the team at the Center Square keep an eye out for. But you can read more about that hearing and others at thecentersquare.com. It is Illinois in Focus daily, each and every weekday morning with you here with the Center Square.
This millionaire surcharge for property tax relief would raise $4.5 billion.
Absolutely not. I mean, Democrat policies are already driving taxpayers and the large taxpayers out of this state, and that'll just make it worse.
It's Senate candidate Don Tracy following former Illinois Governor Pat Quinn on the question of should Illinois charge a 3% surcharge to millionaires in order to find some property tax relief, as the state of Illinois has the highest property taxes in the country. It's Illinois in Focus daily with the Center Square. Go and check out the headline, Ex-Illinois Governor Pushes for Millionaires Surcharge Amendment. It's the Illinois Constitution. And the governor was in Springfield yesterday after being in Chicago the day before pushing this idea. So where are we at here? Again, if you recall, the 2024 ballot had a non-binding question about whether or not there should be a 3% surcharge on millionaires, and that should go to property tax relief. Well, that did pass a non-binding resolution across the state, got 60+%, I I believe, on the November 2024 election. And that's giving some ammunition to Governor Pat Quinn, former governor. He was governor after Rod Blagojevich was impeached and ultimately sentenced and went into prison. He was the lieutenant governor. And then Quinn, after Blagojevich went away, became governor and ran again and lost to Governor Bruce Rauner. So Quinn was governor for 2009 to 2015, and he's back at it with pushing for ballot initiatives. He says he's got the history of grassroots efforts to change the Illinois Constitution. He highlighted the creation of the Citizens Utility Board through a grassroots efforts. He talked about the cutback amendment that he got into the Illinois Constitution back in 1980, shrinking the size of the General Assembly and a variety of other things. But he talked about the millionaire surcharge and how he says it's an important proposition that Illinois needs because he acknowledged Illinois has the highest property taxes in the country.
That's a rather select group of people in Illinois. They're blessed. They are lucky enough to have that $1 million a year income.
Now, I think others may not use the word lucky enough. Some may say a millionaire is somebody who makes more than $1 million. Could be a small business busting their hump, working 80 plus hours a week. Others may say that the only person seemingly lucky enough to get $1 million is Governor J.B. Pritzker, who won $1.4 million playing poker over in Las Vegas recently. But regardless, Governor Pat Quinn talking about why he thinks that millionaires should pay an extra 3% surcharge on their $1 million to help fund property tax relief.
But having a surcharge of 3% only on millionaires is the best way to raise significant money to reduce property taxes on families and businesses in Illinois. According to the Illinois Department of Revenue, this millionaire surcharge for property tax relief would raise $4.5 billion. That's a lot of money, and it's needed to be the biggest property tax relief measure in state history.
So what is this going to look like if it gets on the ballot? Well, first, just to understand how a proposed constitutional amendment gets on the ballot, you can either have a citizen-led initiative, which there are very high obstacles to obtain that, plus possible court challenges that have blocked other citizen-driven initiatives to change the Constitution. One in particular, if you recall, was the issue about having a independent commission oversee drawing political maps in Illinois instead of having the legislature do that. But another avenue is to essentially have the legislature approve out of both chambers with supermajorities, putting on the ballot a question to change the Constitution. I don't think the governor has to sign that. I think the legislature just passes it, but they have to do it by May 3rd next year in order to have enough time between May 3rd and the November election to get everything in line to get that on the ballot. Plus, you've got other considerations. There's only a certain amount of voter-led initiatives that can be on the ballot for statewide. I believe it's only 3. So interesting to see that this is the one that Governor Pat Quinn is pushing for, to have a surcharge to charge millionaires 3% extra on top of the flat income tax that Illinois has. And he says that's going to help with property tax relief, putting it into a property tax relief fund and giving rebates directly to people who have homestead exemptions, for instance. He also talked about how that money could be used to give to certain jurisdictions that could roll back their property tax. But I asked how throwing more money at the state's high property taxes, highest in the nation property taxes, actually addresses what's driving Illinois' high property taxes.
Just increasing the amount of revenue coming in, that's not going to necessarily, or even giving rebates, that's not going to address what's driving property taxes going up.
Well, I agree. You have to look at the levies of all the units of government that levy property tax bills every year. I agree with that kind of watching and oversight. I think if you really look at it, 2/3 of the property tax bill for most people goes to the school district. I think that needs to be looked at. And what I did when I was governor in 2014 is I put an advisory referendum on the ballot. I signed it into law and campaigned for it. They called for a 3% surcharge on giving on millionaires in order to give money to school districts in order to reduce their property tax levy. And that could be as well a proposed constitutional amendment you could put together with the rebates for property taxpayers who have the homestead exemption. And you could also say to school districts, the state of Illinois has, under our Constitution, the duty to be the primary responsibility for funding education. Our state really hasn't lived up to that constitutional admonition. And so by what happened in 2010 or 2014 for the referendum we had on the ballot, a millionaire amendment then, that money could be used to help school districts get money from the state as long as they reduce their property tax levy. And I think that's what you're getting at.
Now, I've been covering different levels of government for 15 plus years and used to cover Springfield city government, right? The capital city, the municipal government. And every year they'd have budget conversations and debates about, how are we going to address the property tax levy? And in the municipality in particular, I recall the budget director for several years in a row, and I'm sure it's probably still the case, all of the city of Springfield's share of property taxes were going to pay pensions for public sector employees that worked for the city that no longer work for the city. So all the share of the property taxes for the city of Springfield was going to just pay for people who aren't working anymore. That's a big driver for at least the municipal pensions, the municipal property tax. But you look at your property tax bill and it breaks down. You got 8, 7, maybe 10 units of government that you're paying, and the majority of that's going to your school district. So what's being done? What can be done to address property tax increases, with the state of Illinois being at the top of the list for highest property taxes in the nation? We used to be behind New Jersey, but when you look at over the weekend, people burning their Cook County property tax bills because you're seeing 90+% increases in how much it's costing people now. They can't afford it anymore. So they're revolting and burning their property tax bills. This idea of the 3% surcharge, how is that going to impact Illinois' already diminished competitiveness with other states? That's another question I had for former Illinois Governor Pat Quinn.
An economic disadvantage to neighboring states and states like Texas and Florida. Florida's governor's eyeing getting rid of the property tax altogether. Missouri, I believe, is eyeing getting rid of the income tax. How does this not negatively impact the state's competitiveness?
Well, let's have a referendum on it. We had one last year that was advisory. I think that we can, in a referendum campaign, spell out how you can have a fairer system, a system that's not unfair towards ordinary people living from check to check every month. And I think we can win that. I think we showed last year that there's great support for that idea. If you take a look around the country with respect to the tax system, some states are much better than others when it comes to fairness. Illinois is one of the 10 most unfair tax codes in the whole country. Study after study, year after year. The reason why you're unfair is we rely way too much on property taxes to fund government, especially education. So we want to change that. If you want to change things in a democracy, you got to roll up your sleeves and get out there and advocate. And I did that in 2014, 2024. I'm going to do it in the coming year, too.
Now, Quinn obviously making that pitch. You're probably going to hear a lot more about this in 2024 when it was just an advisory referendum. So it wasn't something that was binding. There was no real opposition against it, just because it was just a question. It wasn't going to force anything. So those who would oppose such a constitutional amendment didn't put up the money to oppose it. So it'd be interesting to see just how this comes together with the November 2026 election coming up rapidly. All right, we got less than a year now. But I ran into Republican Illinois U.S. Senate candidate Don Tracy at the State House yesterday. And I asked him about this. Should Illinoisans have a 3% surcharge on millionaires for property tax relief? Here's the Senate candidate, Don Tracy.
Absolutely not. I mean, Democrat policies are already driving taxpayers and the large taxpayers out of this state, and that'll just make it worse. Where has that ever worked? It just hasn't. I mean, that's what the Democrats always do. They can't control spending, so they have to ever increase taxes, and then they always want to tax the rich. But where has that ever worked?
What should be done to alleviate Illinois' highest property taxes?
We need to elect more Republicans. I mean, we're standing here at the state capitol in Sangamon County. Sangamon County is run by a Republican county board. And they have kept a lid pretty much on property taxes, way more so than the state as a whole and other localities. With good, competent management of the government, you can hold the line on property taxes. And especially if you're not doing giveaway programs. That's really sounds overly simplistic, but the solution is to elect Republicans and competent managers of government.
We'll hear a lot more from Don Tracy. Chatted with him on a couple of different issues. I'll share more of that tomorrow here with Illinois in Focus Daily as we come to you each and every weekday morning with the latest of what's going on in the land of Lincoln. And we'll also keep you posted on the ongoing debate around whether or not Illinois should have a surcharge on millionaires. 3%. Pay it up, and that's going to be redistributed to others if this particular amendment passes. All right, go to thecentersquare.com, get the headlines, subscribe. Wake up with us here for Illinois in Focus Daily. All right, one more segment coming up. Stay tuned.
The glaring issue is the error rate. How it's virtually doubled in 7 or 8 years is a question that I think every taxpayer in the state should be aware of. I think it's important that we all keep an eye on that number to ensure that simply by people being careless.
That is State Senator Don DeWitt during this week's Joint Committee on Administrative Rules hearing, questioning Department of Human Services officials about the state's high error rate in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, federal tax subsidies for food benefits for those who need it the most. And Illinois' error rate has practically doubled in the past 7 or 8 years. What's being done to bring that down? Because if it doesn't come down, it's going to cost Illinois taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning as we break things down for you to understand in the land of Lincoln so you can get on with your day. Listen, I get paid to do this each and every weekday morning. I get paid to watch hours and hours and hours of committee hearings and stay up way into the early morning hours whenever they're in session. So it really truly is a blessing to exercise my First Amendment rights of free speech and free press and get paid for it. So greatly appreciate your support, and you can support the Center Square. Go to thecentersquare.com and donate. But let's get to it. The SNAP error rate, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Now, a couple of things. Obviously, we just got off of a more than 40-day long federal government shutdown. And November 1st, SNAP benefits were frozen because there was no authority to spend the money. There were lawsuits, and there were judges saying you can spend half of it, and the Trump administration pushing back saying we don't have the authority to do any of it. So ultimately, Democrats, few, including Illinois U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, caved and joined some Republicans in voting to reopen the government. Another potential government shutdown could happen in late January. We'll see what happens. But part of all of this, of course, was the SNAP benefits being frozen because of the government shutdown. But even before the government shutdown and those SNAP benefits were frozen, which they have since reopened, you had the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress pass the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. And in that, it dealt with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and ensuring states get their error rate down. Now, the error rate for a state's SNAP program includes overpayments and underpayments, though the vast majority of the error rate is overpayments, meaning paying people food benefits that's a level that they don't deserve or they don't deserve at all because of certain eligibility requirements. So the federal government's requiring states to get the SNAP error rate down below 6% or have to spend state tax dollars to cover the cost. There's also new eligibility requirements that were actually in place, from my understanding, before COVID. But then the COVID pandemic, they lifted a bunch of these, and the Trump administration looking to just revert back to requiring people to go to work or to volunteer in order to get food benefits, unless they are, disabled and can't work. So there's certain types of eligibility requirements that are now law that the state of Illinois is going to have to comply with, or again, it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, a bipartisan committee at the State House that oversees administrative rulemaking. So when a law is passed, the administration and the agencies have to craft the rules that they're going to use to enforce the law. And that's what JCAR's role is to oversee these rules and to have all of it out in the open as best they can. Now, JCAR is an interesting body. They were scheduled for like 11 o'clock, for instance. But they typically don't get into the chamber until like noon, an hour after or so. They have a pre-meeting beforehand, and they talk about all the things they're going to talk about. So it's interesting to see, a very concise and distilled hearing after a pre-hearing that's behind closed doors with staff. But during the public hearing, Republican State Senator Don DeWitt from St. Charles, he talked about SNAP and just some of the numbers that the Pritzker administration's put out there as to who's going to be impacted by eligibility requirements.
First of all, can you tell me the number that the governor is suggesting Illinois residents who he is anticipating are going to be purportedly losing all of their SNAP benefits?
I off the top of my head,
Yeah.
I do not have that number, and I don't want to give an incorrect number, but I can definitely share that with you.
Okay.
It is, I will say it is a large amount that could potentially lose their benefits under the new role of the able-bodied adults without dependent rules.
Sure. So has anybody done a calculation as to what percentage of those current SNAP benefactors will be exempted by existing rules and regulations in the state of Illinois?
I don't believe that there is a calculation, to my knowledge,
Okay.
that has been shared with me.
Would you at least acknowledge that there could be a percentage of those recipients who could continue to receive their SNAP benefits given the existing exemptions that appear to be remaining in place?
There is a percentage, and I will say currently what the Department of Human Services is doing is working to make sure that everybody who is eligible for those exemptions is receiving them.
Could you at least acknowledge that there could be a significant number of those people who may very well choose to meet the work requirements?
I don't think that it's my place to speak for those people, whether or not they choose to meet those work requirements.
I'm just asking, do you believe some of them may choose to opt in for the working requirements in order to maintain their SNAP benefits?
It's possible, sure.
So the questions, of course, are about, some of the numbers that the Pritzker administration and the director of the Department of Human Services have put out there and, characterizing Trump and Republican laws that were passed and signed by the federal government to have work requirements. And we've heard numbers of like 300,000 people in Illinois are going to be cut off instantly. And the red flags that the Pritzker administration's raised with large numbers and the economic impact that they claim it's going to have, and so on. And I believe DeWitt at one point in the JCAR hearing criticized that, saying that the numbers are seemingly inflated by the Pritzker administration, and some could see that as being for a political purpose. But DeWitt focused in on the SNAP error rate. Again, Illinois' error rate practically doubled in about 7 or 8 years.
Numbers that were put out by the USDA comparing 2017, which would have been the last year before the governor came into office, at 5.73%, have now climbed to almost double that number of 11.56%. And again, those are calculations made by the Department of Agriculture. Can you talk a little bit about why has that number doubled over the last 7 or 8 years? It's a very expensive proposition for the state of Illinois if the number stays high, correct? To the tune of about $800 million is the
under the new rules with the cost sharing. I don't know if the whole $800 million is just from the cost sharing for error rate, but it is. And so the department's priority right now is making sure that our rules are updated and clear enough to mitigate those errors as much as possible.
So what exactly is the department going to do when it comes to other aspects of the SNAP program and ensuring that it complies with federal law and it saves Illinois taxpayers from covering the error rate? One thing that the DHS official talked about was, for instance, getting the program in place to track eligibility, looking at the cost of living allocation increases, that making sure that those match up with eligibility, and a variety of other things that she lays out.
That is updated trainings, making sure people have updated trainings. It is increasing our redetermination schedule from yearly to every 6 months. So people will have to renew their benefits every 6 months. It is requiring people to submit proof of housing expenses to make sure that housing expenses are being recorded appropriately and calculated correctly into a person's benefit amount. Those are a couple that I can think of off of the top of my head. There are quite a number of them, but those are some of the biggest ones that we are implementing.
My fear is this entire situation is being not only promoted by DHS, but the numbers are being exaggerated. Every one of these projections that we read about are all worst-case scenarios, with none of the potential adjustments of either exemptions or work requirement acceptance being calculated into this process. The glaring issue is the error rate. How it's virtually doubled in 7 or 8 years is a question that I think every taxpayer in the state should be aware of. I think it's important that we all keep an eye on that number to ensure that simply by people being careless,
and it's going to cost taxpayers a lot of money, $800 million potentially. And there's other cost sharing that the federal government's asking states to step up for and cover, and that includes just implementing the program. But the vast majority of, actually all of the SNAP funding's coming from the federal taxpayers. So when you've got an error rate of 11.5%, I mean, that's like 1 out of every $10 that is an error going out. That's a lot of money. State Representative Ryan Spain, a Republican from Peoria, asked the DHS official, the bureau chief, as to when exactly they're going to see some of these policies enacted to start bringing down that SNAP error rate, and she responded.
Part of the complication is that guidance from the federal level has been very slow in coming down the pipes and has been very vague. These haven't been put into the rules that we often refer back to. We are awaiting guidance for some missing information, for instance, on the changes to immigrant eligibility. They had issued some guidance to us that had a big gap in the eligibility rules.
But we need to continue to have these discussions and receive updates and understand if there are policy tools that are needed to drive that error rate down to an acceptable level so that the taxpayers, as Senator DeWitt mentioned, aren't on the hook for a very important benefit, but it's a very expensive benefit. And if we can reduce the error rate as a state of Illinois, we'll be doing a good service for both of those groups.
If there's a lot of fraud going out, then that's taking away from those who need it most. As you can hear the debate going back and forth, something that JCAR is going to keep their eye on, I imagine. And they meet once a month and see if they continue moving forward with their oversight of how the SNAP program is being operated in the land of Lincoln. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Get the headlines in your inbox. Go to thecentersquare.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Get this podcast where you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus and you'll find it. But again, make thecentersquare.com a regular stop for your morning information. All right, that's all I got for you on this Thursday. Can't believe it's already Thursday. The week's kind of flown by after I had last week off. But we got plenty more to tackle. Going to be talking to hopefully some more Republican candidates for governor. I already talked with one. We'll be sharing that with you. But also got a good conversation I had with Don Tracy, the Republican U.S. Senate candidate, but he's facing other potential candidates in the March primary. I asked him about that and his confidence levels, if he's going to be able to rise to the top after the March primary, and the importance, he says, of having a Republican statewide office holder in the U.S. Senate from Illinois. So we'll hear about that tomorrow and so much more. Plus, I've got stuff I'm working on with commercial driver's licenses and enforcement of English language proficiency. So we'll share some details on that and so much more. Okay, go to thecentersquare.com and get the latest. We'll see you back here tomorrow for more Illinois in Focus Daily.